She boarded that plane as my wife. She stepped off it as someone I didn't recognize. And somewhere over the ocean, I lost her without even knowing it. I didn't think anything of it at first. The way she adjusted her sunglasses on the ride to the airport. The silence between us that felt heavier than usual. I chalked it up to the stress of packing, the early morning flight, the usual logistics of getting out the door. Vacations always made Sarah anxious. She liked routine, structure, and for someone who prided herself on control, the chaos of travel didn't sit well. But she'd planned this trip herself, down to the last detail. Hotel booked months in advance. Activities slotted into a color-coded spreadsheet she shared with me the week before. She even picked our seats on the plane. She said it would be good for us. A reset. Time away from the noise. And I wanted that too. More than I admitted. The truth is, we've been off for a while. Not fighting, exactly. Just misfiring. Drifting. Conversations turned shallow. Love became scheduled or skipped altogether. But I kept telling myself that was normal. 13 years together. People change, right? Maybe it was just a season. A rut we'd pull ourselves out of, like we always had before. At least, that's what I thought when I looked over at her in the back of the Uber that morning. Her lips were pressed into a thin line, scrolling something on her phone. She didn't look up when I reached for her hand. Just let it sit there in mine like something forgotten. Still, I smiled. Tried to meet the silence with optimism. It'll be good to get away, I said. She nodded. Barely. The airport was a zoo, of course. Security lines looping like theme park queues. Screaming toddlers. Delayed flights. But we got through it without incident, and once we were past security, she seemed to loosen up a little. Bought us overpriced coffees. Even laughed at something I said about a guy wearing socks with flip-flops. By the time we boarded, I was starting to feel hopeful again. We were flying economy, but she'd paid for the seats with extra legroom near the front. She always thought ahead like that. Thought of everything. And that's where I saw him for the first time. The flight attendant. Tall. Clean-cut. Sharp features. The kind of guy who probably knew exactly how white his teeth looked when he smiled. He was helping an older woman stow her carry-on in the overhead bin when we stepped into the cabin. Sarah brushed past me and flashed him a quick smile, one of those polite, practice things women do when they're moving through the world. At least, that's what I thought. He smiled back. Said something I didn't catch. Sarah laughed. I didn't think anything of it. We found our seats. She took the window. I took the aisle. There was a quiet pause between us as people settled in, filled the rows. I leaned over and said, "Window seat, huh?" Strategic. She looked at me, that faint smile still hovering. Always. It was small, but I noticed it. That she didn't seem tense anymore. Like something had shifted. I told myself it was a good thing. Once we were in the air, I pulled out my tablet and started a movie. Sarah stared out the window for a long time. Then she reached for her blanket, curled into the corner, and closed her eyes. Or at least, she pretended to. At one point during the flight, I got up to stretch and hit the bathroom. When I came back, she was awake, or at least sitting up, and talking to someone. It was him, the flight attendant, kneeling slightly in the aisle beside her seat, one hand gripping the overhead bin for balance. He was smiling. She was laughing at something he said. The kind of laugh that crept into her eyes made them wrinkle at the corners. I stood there for a second, half blocked by a man retrieving his laptop from the bin above us. When I reached our row again, the flight attendant gave a polite nod and stood up. "Everything okay?" I asked, sliding back into my seat. "Yeah," she said, tucking the blanket tighter around herself. "Just chatting." He asked if we needed anything. "Oh, he's funny," she added, offhand, like it didn't matter. "You were asleep." I wasn't, but I let it go. We landed just past noon local time. Tropical sun, thick air. The kind of heat that clings to your skin. As we stepped off the plane, she looked different somehow. More alert. Energized. like someone waking from a dream. Maybe it was the excitement of the trip finally kicking in. Or maybe I just imagined it. The shuttle to the hotel took about 20 minutes. She sat close, resting her head on my shoulder. It felt good. Familiar. Like maybe we really were reconnecting. Maybe this was the beginning of something healing. I didn't see the flight attendant again. Not for a while, anyway. The hotel was nicer than I expected. Cream-colored stucco, breezy open-air lobby, the kind of place with cucumber water by the front desk and folded towels that smelled like eucalyptus. Sarah had picked it, of course. She always had an eye for detail, and it showed. Our room had a partial ocean view and a balcony that looked out over palm trees and the edge of the infinity pool. It felt like luxury, even if it had cost more than we should have spent. Worth it, she said, arms stretched above her head, face tilted toward the sun filtering through the glass. Feels like we're finally breathing again. I kissed her shoulder. Yeah, you did good. She smiled at that, but it was brief, the kind of smile you might give a waiter or a stranger in an elevator. Not the one she used to give me. The old Sarah used to smirk when she was proud of herself, a hint of mischief in her eyes like she knew how good she had it and wasn't afraid to flaunt it. This one was different. Softer. More distant. I told myself it was just exhaustion. That night we unpacked, ordered room service, and sat on the balcony drinking the overpriced wine they left us as a welcome gift. I remember the way the glass sweated in my hand. The quiet between us wasn't uncomfortable exactly, but it wasn't easy either. It felt like two people trying to remember a rhythm they once knew by heart. She looked out over the pool. I forgot how quiet this kind of place can be. I nodded. You mean peaceful? Yeah, she said after a beat. That too. Later, when I tried to initiate, gently, like someone testing water temperature, she kissed me, but it was mechanical. Polite. Like kissing a cousin you hadn't seen in years. And then she pulled away, curled onto her side of the bed, and muttered something about a headache and travel fatigue. I stared at the ceiling for a long time that night. The next morning, she was already up before me. Dressed in a sundress, hair pinned up, humming to herself as she scrolled through her phone. You sleep? She asked, not looking up. Eventually. We should get down to breakfast. The buffet closes at 10. The day passed quickly. We rented bikes and explored the town, had lunch at a little seafood place by the pier, wandered through local shops. She was in a good mood, lighter than she'd been in weeks, maybe months. She made jokes, asked strangers to take pictures of us, even kissed me on the cheek without prompting. But something felt rehearsed about it, like she was playing a part she'd memorized too well. That night, I heard her whispering on the balcony. It was late. I'd gone to bed early, worn out from the sun and the cocktails we'd had by the pool. I woke up around 2 a.m. and noticed the sheets beside me were cool. She wasn't in the room. The glass door to the balcony was cracked open. I got up slowly, trying not to startle her. But as I stepped closer, I heard her voice, low, conspiratorial. She was on the phone. I paused, heart thudding, and leaned just close enough to make out a few words. No, I told you, not yet. It's not like that. Pause. I know, but I can't just disappear. Another pause. A quiet laugh, soft, nervous. Stop. You're going to get me in trouble. Then silence. When I stepped out onto the balcony a few seconds later, she jumped slightly and fumbled her phone, pretending to look at the time. Hey, she said, too quickly. Couldn't sleep. Yeah, I said, voice flat. Me neither. She tucked the phone into her robe pocket. I was just checking tomorrow's plans. I might book us a snorkeling thing. Right now. She blinked. The app has a live chat. I was asking about availability. I stared at her. She didn't look away. You think I'm lying, she said after a beat. I didn't say that. You didn't have to. She turned, went inside, and climbed into bed without another word. The next morning, I woke to an empty room. There was a note on the nightstand in her handwriting. Spa morning. Back before lunch. Love you. 3 words underlined twice, like an afterthought meant to reassure me. The handwriting was rushed, not her usual neat, controlled script. I stared at it for a long time. I thought about confronting her, about asking straight up who she was on the phone with. But what would I even say? I had nothing concrete, no proof, just late-night whispers and intuition clawing at the back of my brain. And besides, we were on vacation. This was supposed to be the good part. I went for a walk on the beach, cleared my head, told myself I was being paranoid. By the time I got back, she was in the pool, laughing with a group of people I didn't recognize, a young couple from Boston, another solo traveler. She waved me over, like everything was normal, like she hadn't disappeared before sunrise and left me alone with a note. That night, over dinner, she asked if I was okay. "You've been quiet," she said, her fork spearing a grilled scallop. "I'm fine." She nodded. "You seem distant." I could say the same about you. Her eyes narrowed slightly. "So we're doing this now." "I'm just saying." She dropped her fork, the clatter sharp against the ceramic plate. "I'm not going to fight with you. Not here. I'm not trying to fight." "Then stop reading into everything." Jesus. She stood up and left the table without another word. I didn't follow her. The waiter came by a few minutes later, looking awkward. Will she be returning, or? "No," I said, reaching for my wallet. "She won't." I paid the bill and walked the beach alone that night. The waves crashed against the shore like static in my ears. I thought about the last time we were happy, truly, uncomplicatedly happy. I couldn't place it. Maybe the thing about distance is you don't notice it growing until the silence becomes a language all its own. Maybe she was just tired, or grieving something she hadn't told me, a part of herself lost along the way. Or maybe I was losing her, inch by inch, and she'd already made peace with that. 2 days later, Sarah woke up before me again. I heard her in the bathroom, humming softly. The same tune she'd been humming since we arrived. I couldn't place it, something airy, repetitive, but it lingered like a smell you couldn't shake. She moved with purpose that morning, like someone with somewhere to be. Hair braided, perfume I hadn't seen her pack, lipstick, which she rarely wore during vacation. Going somewhere? She glanced at me in the mirror. Yoga on the beach. They're doing a class at 7:30. I looked at the clock. 7:12. You hate yoga. I don't hate it. I just never had the time. Now you do. She met my eyes through the mirror. What's with the 3rd degree? I sat up. There's no degree. Just, you've been getting up early, staying out late. I feel like I'm on this trip alone half the time. She capped her lipstick and turned around. I'm trying. I'm doing things for me for once. Isn't that what this trip is supposed to be about? I thought it was about us. She didn't answer. Just grabbed her mat and slipped on her sandals. I'll be back before breakfast, she said over her shoulder. I watched the door close behind her, and the silence that followed felt deliberate, like something she left for me to sit in. I got up an hour later and wandered down to the cafe near the pool. Ordered a black coffee, stared out at the water. I looked for her silhouette on the beach, for a row of people in downward dog. But all I saw were early risers walking the shoreline, couples with matching hats, staff setting out lounge chairs. No yoga mats. No instructor. No Sarah. That day we had a boat excursion booked, a glass-bottom cruise that came highly rated on her itinerary. She came back to the room just before 9, damp hair, sunglasses already on, acting like nothing was off. How was yoga? I asked. Great. Where was it again? She looked at me for a beat too long. On the far end of the beach. Huh. I didn't see anyone out there. Her lips thinned. Maybe you were looking in the wrong place. I dropped it. Not because I believed her, but because I didn't trust myself to keep my voice even. On the boat, she was warm again, holding my hand, pointing out fish under the glass like a child seeing magic for the first time. She kept brushing against me like we were newlyweds again. It didn't feel real. It felt like a correction. We took pictures. Well, I did. She kept handing me her phone and telling me to get shots of her with the water in the background. Close-ups, wide angles, over-the-shoulder poses. She smiled in every one, a little too bright. Later, on the shuttle ride back, she leaned against me and said, "I feel like today was good." "Yeah," I said, because I didn't want to argue. It was. But that night, I couldn't sleep again. Something itched in the back of my skull. A kind of low-grade static that wouldn't shut off. So I did something I hadn't done in years. I grabbed the old digital camera from the side pouch of my suitcase, the one we used to travel with before everything went to phones. I'd brought it out of nostalgia more than anything. A last-minute throw-in. I turned it on. Battery was low, but it still worked. And there, in the feed, I saw something I didn't expect. Not pictures from today. Not fish or waves or her posed on the railing. But two shots I hadn't taken. Two photos I didn't remember being on the card. One was of Sarah, taken from behind, standing near the hotel pool in that same sundress from our first full day. Her head tilted, her body half-turned like she was mid-laugh. In the bottom corner of the frame was the edge of a hand. Male. Close. The second was blurrier. Indoors. Hotel hallway. Her again, this time facing away, walking toward what looked like a service door. Same hand. Closer. I stared at those images for 10 minutes. They were time-stamped for that morning, the one where she left early and said she went to the spa. Before we met up for lunch. I didn't know what to do with them. It felt absurd. Like maybe I'd taken them by accident. Or maybe someone else had used the camera, but who? It had been in our room. My bag. I showed them to her the next morning. Calmly. Quietly. She blinked, then frowned. "You went through my photos? They're on the camera. Not your phone." I didn't take them. She studied the screen for a moment. Maybe it was a staff member. Sometimes they take photos for marketing. I've had that happen before. In a hallway? She shrugged. Maybe it wasn't meant to be a photo. Maybe it was an accident. "You don't think it's weird?" She laughed once, a brittle, tired sound. "What do you want me to say, Ryan? That I'm being stalked? That someone's taking secret photos of me? I don't know what I want. Just the truth." She stared at me. Something shifted in her eyes, not fear, not anger. Something more like exhaustion. Then she turned and walked into the bathroom, closing the door behind her. I didn't push it. That afternoon we went to a cooking class in town. Sarah was quiet the whole time, smiling for the chef, following instructions, but not speaking to me unless prompted. I asked her later if she was okay. "I'm fine," she said, reaching for her phone. "Just tired." That night, as I was getting ready for bed, I saw her texting. She turned the screen away when I came close. Said she was checking on a friend back home who was having a rough week. I didn't ask which friend. I already knew I wouldn't like the answer. I thought I was imagining it. The late-night whispers, the missing mornings, the lies wrapped in routine. But when I saw the photo, blurry and half-cropped, I knew I wasn't crazy. The next morning, she was in bed when I woke up. Not dressed. Not humming. Just lying there on her side, scrolling through her phone with a blank expression that shifted when she noticed me watching. "Hey," she said. Her voice was warm. Too warm. "You sleep okay?" "Yeah," I lied. She stretched and moved closer, resting her hand on my chest like it was nothing. Like none of the past few days had happened. "What time is the breakfast thing?" she asked, fingers tracing a slow, absent-minded circle on my skin. 10, I think." "Plenty of time," she murmured, then kissed me. Deeply. Slowly. I didn't kiss back right away. Something about it felt off. A peace offering after a war I didn't know we'd officially declared. But I let it happen. Because some part of me still needed it, needed her. When we finally made it down to the patio, she was glowing. Hair still damp from a quick shower, sunglasses perched on her head, skin flushed from the sun already creeping over the ocean. She was making jokes again, talking to the waiter in slow, accented English like she always did when we traveled abroad. I studied her across the table, trying to recognize the version of her sitting there. This was the woman I married, and also not. I asked if she wanted to go into town again that afternoon, maybe walk the harbor or grab a drink by the market. She said, "I can't. I booked a massage." "Since when?" "Last night. After you fell asleep." I nodded. "So you'll be gone most of the afternoon?" "Just a couple hours." She poured more coffee. "You could go to the market without me. Pick up souvenirs or something." That stung more than it should have. She'd always been the one to care about the little trinkets, the handmade pottery, the local oils, the carved wooden turtles. "I'll wait," I said. "You don't have to." "I know." She looked up at me then, and something passed between us, a flicker of guilt, or maybe irritation. I couldn't tell. The mask stayed on. After breakfast, we walked the beach. She took off her sandals and let the surf nip at her ankles, letting out a small gasp at the cold. I watched her move ahead of me, watching the way she tilted her head back toward the sun like someone desperate to feel anything. That's what this felt like, a woman reaching for sensation. Around noon, she said she was heading to the spa. I walked her to the elevator. She kissed me again. Slow. Tender. The kind of kiss that lingered in your chest. Then she said, "Don't overthink everything, Ryan. Just enjoy the day." Before I could respond, the elevator doors closed. I waited a full 5 minutes before walking to the front desk. The woman behind the counter greeted me with a smile. I leaned in. "Hey, weird question. My wife just went up to the spa. Can you tell me if she has a massage appointment on the books?" The woman hesitated, then typed something into the computer. "What's the last name?" I gave it. She scanned the screen. "No, sir. I don't see anything under that name today." I swallowed. "Are there any appointments around now?" She glanced again. "We have one scheduled under a Julia Mendez at 12:30. That's the only one close." "Thanks." I stepped back and left the lobby. I didn't know what I was doing, whether I even wanted to catch her in a lie. But something in me refused to sit still. I walked outside and circled around the far end of the hotel where the spa patio overlooked the back garden. Through the slatted privacy fence, I could see part of the lounging area. White ropes, orange slices in water. A couple people seated on loungers, heads back, eyes closed. She wasn't there. I waited 10 minutes, then 20. Nothing. Eventually, I gave up and went to the bar on the beach. Ordered a drink, then another. She came back to the room around 3:15. Towel around her shoulders, hair twisted up, cheeks flushed from heat. "Massage was amazing," she said, dropping her bag. "I needed that." "Yeah, ma'am." "Where was it?" She blinked. "Spa, obviously. Front desk didn't have you on the books." Her eyes hardened, just for a second. "Well, maybe they made a mistake. Or maybe I booked under my maiden name. I've done that before." "You haven't used your maiden name in 6 years." She picked up the towel and headed for the bathroom. "I'm not doing this with you, Ryan. I'm really not." "Then just tell me where you were." "I told you." She slammed the door shut. That night, there was a party at the rooftop bar, something the hotel hosted weekly, with live music and open seating under string lights. Sarah insisted we go. "We'll dance," she said. "Like old times." And we did. For a while, it even felt okay. She wore a backless navy dress I didn't recognize, and everyone looked at her when she walked into the room. I wasn't surprised. She had always turned heads, even when she pretended not to notice. But that night she noticed. She ordered cocktails with names she couldn't pronounce, whispered in my ear while we danced, laughed too loud at jokes I didn't quite catch. It felt like being on a date with someone playing her part, almost perfect, but slightly out of sync. Later, while I was at the bar getting our second round, I saw her on the edge of the crowd, texting again. She turned her body slightly away from everyone, the glow of the screen lighting up her face. When I returned, She slipped her phone into her bag and smiled. What took you so long? I handed her the drink. Bar was packed. We stayed out late. Back in the room, we had love for the first time in weeks. It was intense, desperate, like she was trying to overwrite everything between us with sensation. But afterward, she rolled over and fell asleep immediately. No words, no softness, just silence. I lay there in the dark, listening to the fan above the bed, counting the seconds between each distant wave outside. Her phone buzzed once on the nightstand beside her. She didn't stir. I didn't look. I wanted to, but I didn't. Not yet. 2 days left. That's what I kept telling myself. Just 2 more days and we'd be home again. Back in our house. Back in our routines. Back in whatever version of normal we still had left. I started counting minutes instead of memories. Measuring silence instead of conversation. Sarah was still playing the role. Laughing. Kissing my cheek. Holding my hand in public. But it all felt like muscle memory. Like she was checking off boxes on a list I hadn't been allowed to see. She was almost too perfect now. Eager to suggest activities. Happy to pose for pictures. Touching me more. Touching me constantly, like contact could erase everything I hadn't said out loud. But the distance was still there. It lived in her eyes. That morning, she wanted to go back into town. Said she'd seen a vendor selling woven throws she regretted not buying. I agreed, mostly because I didn't want her going alone. Not again. We walked through the market, sun burning hot against the stone streets. Music played faintly from a speaker somewhere nearby. Locals shouted from booths. Everything felt a little too bright, too loud, like I'd slipped into someone else's vacation. Sarah stopped to try on bracelets at a stall manned by a girl no older than 20. I watched her twirl one on her wrist, then hold it out to me. Do you like this one? It's nice, I said. She smiled, but didn't buy it. Literally or figuratively. She turned back to the vendor and asked something about a discount. That's when I saw him. Across the street. The flight attendant. I wasn't sure at first. He wasn't in uniform, just a navy shirt and khaki pants, sunglasses on, a canvas bag slung over his shoulder. He looked different without the performative friendliness, but I recognized the jawline. The way he stood. He didn't see me. At least, I don't think he did. But he looked toward our side of the street. His eyes scanned. Paused. Then he turned and disappeared down a narrow side alley. Sarah, I said, my voice sharper than I intended. She looked up. What? That guy. But I stopped. What was I going to say? That's the flight attendant from our plane, and now he's here in the same town, walking the same street, days after we landed? She'd say it was coincidence. Or that I was paranoid. Or worse, that I was jealous, insecure, spiraling. So I said nothing. You okay? She asked. Yeah, I muttered. Just hot. Back at the hotel, I sat on the balcony while she took a nap. I kept thinking about that man. About his presence on the plane. About the way Sarah laughed at his joke that first day. The way she'd started humming after the flight. The late-night call. The sudden change in her energy. The camera photos. I opened her Instagram and scrolled. She'd posted a few shots already, mostly landscapes, some food, a blurry sunset. Nothing with me in it. That used to be her thing. You or nothing, she'd say. I don't do solo vacation posts. People don't need to think I'm single. This time? Not a trace. But it wasn't until I looked at the tagged photos that something caught my breath. A blurry, off-angle shot from the rooftop party 2 nights ago. Posted by a random guest. Captioned, "Live band was amazing last night. Great energy. Great people." There were 5 people visible in the frame. 2 couples dancing. And in the background, Sarah. Standing near the railing. Smiling. Talking to someone just barely outside the frame. Only his arm and part of his side were visible. Navy shirt. Tan skin. The kind of athletic build I didn't recognize from anyone at the hotel. My stomach turned. I zoomed in until the pixels broke apart. Couldn't be sure. I clicked the profile of the person who posted it. A woman from Phoenix, apparently here on a girl's trip. I scrolled through her feed. Nothing else tagged at the resort. Nothing else with Sarah in the background. But the image stuck. That night, Sarah wanted to stay in. She said her stomach hurt. Blamed something she ate in town. But she still did her hair, still wore perfume, still checked her phone more than once an hour. I cooked instant noodles from the minibar, and we ate on the balcony like college students. She leaned into me, her head on my shoulder. "I'm glad we came," she said. "Yeah, I feel like we needed this." "I do too, even if it's not perfect." My chest ached at that. Why wouldn't it be? She didn't answer right away. Then she said, "People grow. That's all. Doesn't mean something's broken. Just means it's not as easy as it used to be." "That's not nothing, Sarah." She looked at me, expression unreadable. I didn't say it was. That night, after she fell asleep, I finally opened her phone. I knew her passcode. She hadn't changed it. I'm not even sure she thought she needed to. I didn't scroll far. Didn't open messages. Didn't check social media. I just went to the call log. And that's when I saw the name. Matt Sky. It had appeared 5 times in the past week. 2 calls placed. 3 received. The last one was just 2 days ago. 6 minutes long. I stared at the screen until my vision blurred. I put the phone back exactly where it was. Then I got up, walked into the bathroom, and threw up quietly into the sink. When I came out, she was still sleeping. Peaceful. Dreaming. I lay down beside her and stared at the ceiling. Her arm slipped across my chest again. But this time, it didn't feel like comfort. It felt like a cage. The night before we flew home, I didn't sleep. Sarah passed out beside me like a child, wrapped in the blanket the hotel left at the foot of the bed. The balcony door cracked just enough to let in the hush of ocean waves. I stared into the dark, listening to her breathe. I couldn't stop picturing it, her with him. The ease in her smile. The low whisper of her voice when she thought I was asleep. The way she clung to me only after she'd spent the day somewhere else. With someone else. Matt Sky. He had a name now. And a place in her phone. I knew what the sky meant before I even let myself say it out loud. I remembered how she'd laughed on the plane. The way he leaned in while she whispered something back. How she suddenly started waking up early, humming, checking her phone like it contained oxygen. It hadn't started here. It had started there, somewhere over the ocean, while I was sitting not 3 feet away. In the morning, we didn't speak much. She moved slower than usual, packing with one hand and sipping coffee with the other. Her energy was different, like someone caught in a storm they thought they'd escaped. At the airport, she sat across from me near the gate, scrolling silently while our boarding group was called. I said nothing. I wanted to. I wanted to scream it into her face. I wanted to ask her who the hell she thought she was. What she thought I was. A placeholder? A prop? But I didn't. Not yet. Not until we were airborne. It felt fitting, poetic, even. She met him on a plane. So she could watch it all come crashing down on one, too. We boarded in silence. She didn't ask for the window this time. She didn't smile at the crew. She didn't even glance up. I watched her hands, how still they were, how tightly she gripped her phone. The cabin was quiet during takeoff. Headphones, baby cries, the soft clink of plastic cups and ice. Sarah stared straight ahead, eyes locked on nothing. An hour in, I finally spoke. "You knew I saw him, didn't you?" She blinked. "What?" "In town. At the market." She didn't answer. Her jaw flexed. "You should have picked a better story. A better lie." "Ryan, don't." "Matt," I said flatly. The name dropped like a coin. Her whole body flinched. I watched her closely. "How long?" She didn't speak. Just looked out the window. "How long, Sarah?" She exhaled slowly, then turned to me. "Since the flight." I nodded. So I was right. Does it matter? I laughed, low and bitter. It matters that you threw away everything in one night, yeah? Her voice dropped. It wasn't one night. The words were quiet, but they cracked everything. What? She looked at me then, and I saw it in her eyes, the resignation. The decision already made. We met on a flight 2 months ago. I was traveling for work. He was crew. We talked. That's all at first. Then he started texting me. I stared at her. You gave him your number? I didn't mean to. What does that even mean? She blinked fast, her mouth trembling once before she controlled it. It was just texting, and then it wasn't. So when you planned this trip, what? You invited him too. I didn't plan it for him. Didn't you? She didn't answer. I leaned back in my seat, pressure building in my chest. The hum of the cabin pressed against my skull. Jesus. She turned toward me, voice low, almost gentle. I needed something to feel different. I was drowning, and cheating fixes that. No, she said. But for a little while, it let me breathe. The cruelty of it hit harder than anything else. She hadn't even tried to make it sound accidental. It wasn't a lapse. It was a choice. Every message, every secret, every lie. You had him here, didn't you? I asked. On this trip. Her silence was an answer. I saw him, Sarah. Not just in town. I saw the pictures. I saw you walking with him. I saw you smiling at someone who wasn't me. She covered her face with her hands, her voice muffled. I didn't mean for you to find out. That was the part that broke me. Not the cheating. Not the deception. The fact that she would have kept going if I'd stayed blind. I turned my head toward the window, watched the clouds drift past like silent, indifferent witnesses. I loved you, I said. I loved you too. No, I said. You don't get to say that. I'm sorry, she whispered. You're sorry, I know. She didn't argue. We didn't speak again for the rest of the flight. When we landed, she reached for her bag first. Walked ahead through the terminal. Didn't wait. She didn't have to. Something had ended up there in the sky, and both of us knew it. The descent was smooth, but the damage had already been done. At baggage claim, she finally looked at me again. I'm going to stay with my sister, she said. Just for a while. I nodded. That's probably best. She opened her mouth like she wanted to add something. A plea, maybe. A justification. But nothing came out. She turned, walked away, and didn't look back. I watched her until she disappeared into the crowd. Until she was just another person leaving behind a suitcase full of things she didn't want anymore. I drove home alone. The house was dark when I got there. Quiet. Still. I dropped my bag in the hallway and stood there for a long time, listening to the sound of my own breathing. Somewhere between departure and return, the gravity had shifted. The place that was ours didn't feel like anything anymore. Just a container for the echo of things we didn't say. I walked into the bedroom and pulled the sheets off the bed. Threw them in the laundry like that could fix something. It didn't. I sat on the edge of the mattress and stared at the empty space beside me. The ghost of her. The ghost of us. There was no closure. No scream. No slam of doors. Just silence. The most honest thing between us in months. She left her robe behind, folded neatly over the chair. And that's the thing about betrayal. It's not always loud. Sometimes it slips in quietly, at 38,000 feet, with a smile and a polite laugh, while the person you love sits right beside you and never sees it coming. Thanks for watching. If this story pulled you in, make sure to subscribe and hit the bell so you never miss the next confession. Until next time, take care and watch who you trust.